Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line.
Good afternoon and welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. Today's guest is Neil Jurd. He's the founder of Leader Connect, an author, coach, and before that, he was an army officer up to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. So welcome to the show, Neil. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start. We're going to talk more or less about transformational leadership and team development, and particularly about doing it the right way. Now, as I've just been talking to you, I've explained that I think military leadership is really something to emulate. And I think a lot of people have completely the wrong idea about it because they think it's rapping out orders and no one can do anything. They've just got to obey. Whereas from my experience of military leadership, it is so much more. It's really supporting everybody from the highest down to the lowest to make them feel good, to make them motivated, to be sure that they feel good in themselves. Because frankly, if people aren't like that, they're not going to follow you. And the whole thing about military leadership is inspiring people to follow, to do good, to do what's right. So why do you think people have such a strange view of military leadership? And can you just quickly say what it really is from your experience?
Yeah, I think the view is very cliched. I think a lot of people get their view of the military from Carry On Sergeant or, kind of reality TV programs where people are put through 1950s basic training. And I think that image is a very kind of easy, comical one, and it's and it tends to stick. But the truth is really very different. And I think a large part of that is because there is a very big emphasis on the concept of leadership and also on culture, actually. And that's unusual. I've been out of the army for 12 years now, and I've worked with a lot of different organizations, and it's very rare. But I think I've almost never come across anyone who's had any meaningful leadership training, leadership in the sake of, rather than management training. And the military, you do a lot. There's, I spent years, literally years, learning how to lead large organizations. And I think that difference in ethos makes a big difference to the culture of the organization.
Yeah. I'm getting distracted before I've even got into the real talk, but I know, talking about culture, you led a Gurkha squadron and you also worked training in the Yemen. So did you find, well, I'm sure various other countries and other people as well, but their cultures are so different to the typical Anglo-Saxon culture. Did you find that you had to adapt the way you led in that or the way you trained them? Was there a difference in that aspect as well?
Not much. And I think being comfortable being yourself, in my case, being comfortable being myself, and connecting with people, just getting to know people and understand them. That's the essence of relationships. And I don't think that's different. And I'm trying to think of the various places I've worked. You've mentioned some, but I've worked in Belize. I spent a year as well, and a few years in Cyprus. And people are people, and leadership is. I summarize it as being about direction and connection, and that connecting with people. It's largely about just humility, being yourself and being decent. And whenever it goes wrong, I think it's when people play a play a role.
Yes.
If they be what they think the leader should be, rather than just being themselves trying to get something done. So there are cultural, there are those kind of cultural things that you do or don't do in different or things that people always enjoy you taking an interest in their culture and learning and trying to learn the language, and they'll often be religious or deeply cultural lines that it's just rude to cross. But even then, people will normally understand that if you don't know about showing the soles of your feet or eating with whatever hand, people will be very accepting. If you're a decent human being and try and connect, people will accept you.
Yeah. And do you find, because I know you've worked in, well, you've got experience in different sectors, so corporate and public and obviously military. Do you find that people view leadership differently, and do they link the ideas of productivity and motivation, well-being and quality of life? Do they have different ideas, or would you say they're similar?
Again, a lot of it comes down to people and how much thought they've given to what the purpose of the organization is, and to leading the organization. So you can have, for me, purpose is really important in any sector. And as you say, I do a lot in education, with schools, with universities, but also with some like national businesses like Virgin Media. I've worked with Wilson James. A focus on purpose, and a purpose that I describe in my work as clear and compelling. I think that's really important, because if you've got that, people will want to be part of it. They'll understand and be able to connect what it is their work's trying to, their individual effort. What's it contributing to? You can have that in any business. You have in the military, it's stressed and we're taught it, but any organization, if the purpose is clear and compelling, people will want to do more. They'll want to be part of it. They'll feel that their work is worthwhile. Yeah,
exactly. So how can leaders better explain this, or better get it across to their teams so that they really understand? Because a lot of the companies I work with, and a lot of the companies I've worked in, we just had no idea. We knew that our company did this, we were in this sector, our targets were this, but the reason why, or any kind of inspiring feeling about what we should do, it just didn't happen. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm thinking in a very old-fashioned way. Maybe my son's age group, they're much more open, but I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I don't know your son, but I know my children, and I
know who he works for, and I know some of the reactions, and
I think you'd go back a stage, and a lot of the companies where you have a company or an organization or a charity where people aren't deeply connected to purpose, it could well be that the purpose isn't that clear, and that the leaders themselves can become disconnected from purpose. They can end up doing what they've always done. This is our product, so we'll keep making our product, or this is the service we deliver, so my only job is to deliver that service. And actually, leaders need to take time to think. It's one of probably the most important function of a leader in my, it's a simple view, but I actually think leadership is simple, and it's hugely overcomplicated and intellectualized, but really it is simple, and the leader just needs to know what they're trying to achieve. That's the key role of a leader, is
Yep.
and to do that, you need to understand the environment and the situation and the people that you've got to work with. But knowing all that, the key role of the leader is to think. Having thought, the leader shares. The leader gets people together and explains it. But I think usually where people don't know what the leader's trying to achieve, the leader doesn't know what they're trying to achieve. Yes. The organisation will have lost that clarity.
Yeah. So if someone finds themselves in that situation, what would you suggest they do? How can they improve it? Because they need, I know in your book you talk about different styles of leadership and about using personality rather than position to get things done. And to me, it seems like that's linked to a certain extent. So if they don't know what they really want to do, if they're not capable of sharing so that people understand, it's almost like they're putting a barrier, which then isn't really using their personality because they're hiding that personality behind the barrier. So how can they open? How can they really bring this forward so that people understand? And also, how can they stay like normal people instead of I am God and you will do what you're told?
So I think there's a temptation to hide behind position and ranks and appointments and grades, and I think, as you say, it is hiding behind it. And people, I wrote somewhere in the book about leadership is just a role in the team. And as the leader, you're not more special, you're not better, but your job is to lead. It's like, it's somebody else's job might be to maintain the pipes or to load the wagons or whatever your trade is. Your job as the leader is to lead, but you're no better, no worse than anybody else. And that's really important, that kind of assumption that my job's to lead, my job's to be really clear where we're going, my job's to gather the force of others. I talk about leaders increasing their impact by connecting with other people. So for me, that's the essence of leadership is connection, and the being comfy with who you are as a leader is really important. A lot of leadership courses follow this sequence of first understand yourself, then understand others, then bring it together. That's like a very common format for leadership learning, and I think it's true. And I think if you're going to have a leadership effect on others, being good with yourself, being very comfortable that you are enough. There's a lovely phrase, leadership is just plain you. This idea, and it comes from a Field Marshal Slim, but the idea that be as yourself, you are at your most powerful as a leader. And if you're pretending to be or trying to be what you think a leader should be, that's incredibly fragile, because under pressure, you have to put every decision through this rather complex route where it's like, here's the situation, not what would I want to do, but what would I in that role want to do? And it becomes very disjointed. It's very hard to make quick decisions when you don't know who you are.
Yeah. And so if you manage to go deeper and really feel comfortable with who you are, if, for example, you've got a business, a company where it's always been very hierarchical or bureaucratic or sort of overly conservative and people don't really think,
Yeah.
How would you recommend somebody transforms that? Because I know one of your main things is transformational leadership and development. How would you recommend someone starts to try and do that? Because it's quite difficult if you've got a company which has always been done one way and you're a new leader and you really have a different view and you want them to feel the purpose, you want them to be involved, you want them to feel trust and belonging and things like that. It's not easy. So how would you do it? Not that I'm giving you a challenge in all these questions.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's not easy, but it's essential. Vibrant organizations work by having this kind of buzz and energy and leadership throughout, where everybody is very focused on and excited by what they're trying to achieve, and feeling trust in leadership, trust in the direction, trust in their own ability, trust in their peers in the organization. There's kind of mutual support. People lean in, they actively will help each other in the pursuit of what they're trying to achieve. But this is hard to get to, and the opposite of it is hierarchical, bureaucratic, status conscious, kind of slow moving, but just enough.
Yes.
To get from, now I'm sort of in the question assuming that the leader has absolute, we're talking about the person who takes over this organization, which is the easiest way to answer it, because then you've got the freedom to say, no guys, this is what good looks like, and to educate people. And you have to educate people. You can't do culture to people. You grow culture with people. So whatever, if someone was listening to this and thinking, yeah, do you know what, that's what we need to do, the easiest thing is then to play this to the people you want to do it with. So you have to share the knowledge, share the education. It's bringing people in. It takes time. People will be very safe, and some people will be thriving under the old way of doing things. Some people will be benefiting from bureaucracy, but I mean benefiting on a personal level. It's not for the greater good. It's not the thing which you're trying to achieve is not benefiting, but they're being well paid, their status is assured, and so on. So there's always a threat in that move. So you have to do it skillfully. You do it with study, you do it with education. You don't lose your nerve, because there will come a time, and I've got in my mind the Tuckman model here, actually, which I've summarized in taking an organization from stagnate to excel. But when you move out of that stagnant, doing what we've always done, this is our position, this is how we do it, we don't need to change it. When you move out of that to the opposite, which is what I think you were describing, this kind of free-flowing, energetic, rather exciting, free, as much freedom as you can give, but within a few constraints. That great vibrancy. But most organizations don't want to go there easily. There'd be fear, there'd be something to be overcome, there'd be like a surface tension which needs a bit of leadership and a bit of courage for the leader to guide an organization to that. It's hard work.
Yes. Work. I can imagine.
But it's worth it. It's worth it, because then you're not, you see, in the first way of working, you're doing everything. You have to think of every idea. You have to think of every idea and direct everybody to fulfill it. In the better way of working, you just own the objective, and then there's this beautiful energy and vibrancy and creativity, and people will surprise you with how much they can do if you surprise them and trust them.
Well, they feel alive, don't they? I mean, if you encourage them with that, they really feel alive. There's like this zest for wanting to do something, and it sparks creativity. But how do you, that's one thing that I've always found difficult. And you just mentioned people that like the bureaucratic way, or, they're comfortable or whatever. When you're developing teams, you have a lot of different personalities, and different personalities can be good because it can help spark and balance. So, someone who's good at one thing or has one type of reaction compared to the other. But if you're trying to develop teams and to really increase their sense of flow, of belonging, of purpose, how do you take into account, or how do you, I don't know the word, how do you sort of balance all of the different personalities so that you do get a complementary result, and you're not destroying one or putting one in a box, you're letting all the different ones grow? Because that sounds to me like that must be one of the most difficult things to do.
This isn't an easy question podcast, is it?
No, sorry. but I have to say, in your book, which I keep behind me, I have all of these little things in all the different places about everything that I've read that I'm like, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to tell my client that. So just quickly, anybody looking, buy the book, right? And back to the difficult questions.
Thank you. What was the question?
The different personalities.
Yeah, I think in that, I think difference is good, but that statement in itself can be a bit misleading, and I think there are some things where you this might be the bit of the book that inspired the question. I don't know, but I've thought a lot about this, and I've worked in very diverse organizations, but the best teams that I've been part of, we've shared values, and I think that's an essence, that you share a belief in what you're trying to achieve, the common purpose, and your core values are the same. Where you can differ is on, everything else. You can differ on your own beliefs, whatever they are, whether they're religious beliefs or views of the world. In fact, the more difference you've got in your education, in your background, I guess the bigger the team brain is, like the more different ideas you've got coming in, as long as your core of whatever your core values are, whether they're fairness or creativity, and as long as they're all feeding into that one thing that you all agree is why you're there. Where you will get stagnant is where people are not, they either don't agree with where the organization's going, or they've got very different values. So they might put, in what their top value could be winning, it could be winning, and that could be winning at all costs. Whereas an organization that would put fairness or integrity would be a very different organization, and the people who would thrive in those organizations would be very, very different. And to me, integrity and fairness are much more sustainable. Short-term winning at every cost can create a very corrosive organization that I personally wouldn't want to be part of.
Yes, I agree. So, and for leaders, when they want to develop themselves, so if they think that they need to do something to improve their, I don't know, the way that they interact or something like that, is there any way that you recommend that they can look at themselves, they can develop their vision, their purpose, their way of leading? What would you suggest for that? Because I'm sure some leaders, they want to do something, but they feel that they're lacking somewhere themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is easier said than done with some people's lives, because I know people are busy, but I find practicing leadership really helps. So as I think you know, I founded a charity years ago. I also ran a cadet force county, and I've always had these kind of voluntary jobs in the background which involve leading groups of people, having objectives, and I think I've learned a lot from having to do it, but in an environment that's possibly a little bit less high pressure than a work environment. So I think, you know, whether it's running one of your children's sports teams, or doing something for the PTA, or something for your local community, but anything where you practice the skills of defining the objective and then connecting with people it's gold dust if you can practice offline. And then when you go into work, because leadership's leadership, I often get asked about, you know, leadership in this sector or that sector, and good leadership is always the same. It's always focused on something that matters, kind, inclusive, creative, fun. It's always the same things. To me, good leadership looks the same wherever you find it. I'd also say understand yourself, and with that, things like a formal or an informal 360 process. And formal, of course, there's lots of organizations or even online tools you can do yourself, where people will say how they find you in this regard or that regard. Informal, you just ask people, but ask them in a way that the correct answer is going to develop you, not just to say yes, you're great. So go for a coffee and say, look, what is there anything I could be doing better? And although that shows, some people would find that really uncomfortable, it's far better to be informed by reality and therefore able to change and develop. Your team will thank you for it. You'll learn from it. And finally, read and study. There's you know, you hear the phrase leaders are readers, and just leadership's not hard, but the more you read about it, the more you'll realize it's not hard. Because the more you read, the more you realize that there are just a few key things that all effective leaders do. And it's always about the way they make people feel. It's always the same thing.
Okay. It sounds brilliant. Thank you so much. And I have the last killer question. Any final piece of wisdom or key strategy that you think we should keep in mind, which is really going to help us going forward?
Yeah, I think about how you communicate with people. I think there's it's almost a model. It's this idea I have that you should just go and have a cup of tea with people. Now, I know the Zoom equivalent is slightly harder, but not really. I mean, you just set up the meeting. I quite often use LinkedIn now. I just say, look, should we just chat now? Yeah. And we just chat. And I think as a leader, if you've got nothing else to do, and even if you have got something else to do, but it's not really urgent, go and connect to people. Go and really connect to people. And I suggest that going to them and having a cup of tea with them, because you're going onto their turf, rather than pulling them into you. You're going and mingling with them, and the cup of tea or the coffee or whatever just shows that you intend to stay for long enough to drink it, so they've got time to have a proper chat with you. So go and connect.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm sure people are going to want to read your book and to know more about what you do. So where can they get in touch with you?
Well, Leader Connect is our main site, but Neil Jurd and neiljurd.com is they'll find me there as well. And the book is everywhere. Waterstones, Blackwell's, Amazon, whatever. So it would be hard not to find the book, I think.
Brilliant. Okay. Neil, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and for all of the great advice, because leadership changes everything. It changes the whole mentality of everybody and everyone in the organization. So getting it right just changes people's lives. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure, Anna. Thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely.
Lovely. Everybody, you've been listening to Neil Jurd. Do get his book. Really, it is well worth it. It's the best book that I've read on leadership, I think, forever. It's because it's so sensible, but it's the sort of thing that just makes people live a real life and they can be happy and creative. So anyway, I'll stop going on. Everybody read his book, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Thank you all for watching today. Take care. Bye.